Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about Systemic War. We've gotten the demo rather recently on Steam, and it absolutely looks like an ambitious game. A modern Total War game, if you will, in a sense, because you do have the strategic layer, and then you have real-time strategy battles, similar to Total War, or really, perhaps a better comparison would be something like Ultimate General American Revolution. Except this game does actually seem awesome compared to what American Revolution ended up being. I think this game has a lot of potential, though we'll see if the ambitions of the developers exceed what they can actually do. Because you have real-time battles, you do have the campaign layer, you do have a game that's really diving into modern conflicts. So great power conflicts, regional powers like Poland, for instance. I imagine there's a huge possibility of controversy surrounding this game, of course, because dealing with those kind of things is inherently going to be controversial. Though on the flip side, that's the great thing about it, because no developer would do a game about Russia's invasion of Ukraine or Russia invading Poland these days. No publisher, big-name publisher, would touch that with a 10-foot pole, which is, well, perhaps for the best in some ways, because they would not do it right. Whereas these guys do seem to know what they're doing. They're not afraid of really touching on some very controversial topics like Nord Stream 2, and in a pretty good way at that. Now, the developers are a small team, and they are using AI to help them make the game, specifically with things like cutscenes and certain UI elements. They're clearly using AI for that. They've said that very publicly, but they would just be unable to make the game if they didn't have the ability to use AI. That's the thing about AI. It can be pretty bad in circumstances, but they can also allow you to do some very awesome stuff. And I think Systemic War is an awesome idea. The execution, we'll find out about it. Absolutely, the demo is limited. But you have real-time battles, you have a strategic layer. Let me just talk a bit about the battles, though. I think a core aspect of any game that's trying to be Total War in a sense is the real-time battles. But like in Total War, vast majority of battles you would fight in a campaign are not necessarily worth going for the loading screen and then spending half an hour dealing with them. My personal issues with the battles right now are as follows. There's no save function in them, and unlike Total War, there's a lot of micro actions you need to take, micromanagement that you need to do in order to succeed in these battles, as opposed to Total War. The thing I don't like, though, is this idea that we've seen in Wargame, the idea that we've seen in Broken Arrow. It's like, oh, you just have a limited number of troops. You can get a lot, but it takes a huge amount of time, so you have these 1-2 hour long battles in a single-player situation without the save function. That is not ideal, so I think they need a save function in battles if they're going to maintain the current micromanagement. And on top of that, from my perspective, with the idea of a grand strategy game that has real-time battles, you should be able to bring most of your army to the battle from the beginning. Because in real life, yes, you do see tanks going on missions, but when the enemy is trying to secure an objective, they'll send a column of 100 vehicles at once. That might fail and you lose the battle in real life. That's a different discussion. But yes, you should have things available. Now, of course, people will argue, well, when people just tank rush each other. I would love people to tank rush them. I'd destroy them just as easily as I did in Broken Arrow with infantry, airstrikes, and attack helicopters, and also artillery. That's the thing with these kind of games. Tank rushing is something people do because they think it works, and it can. Let's be clear. It can, but it can if you are aware of your shortcomings. You need air defenses, you need scouting capability, you need to be aware of airstrikes, you need to control your units properly. So there's a lot of possibilities of fuck-ups, which is the reason I didn't do it in Broken Arrow or in Wargame. Yeah, unless I knew I had such an inherent advantage against the AI that, yeah, they might have a lot of troops, I'm just going to annihilate them. Even then, I preferred using attack helicopters for a reason. But attack helicopters can be countered by air defenses fairly easily. And then, any massive troops on the ground can be countered by artillery or cruise missiles, which in turn can be countered by electronic warfare and anti-air defenses. And you do have production limits on how many units you can make in the game as is. So you have limits. You can't just walk around with 1,000 tanks as Poland. I mean, you can get 1,000 tanks. You'll also bankrupt yourself if you're producing 1,000 tanks too early, and you won't be able to produce them in the first place or even purchase them. And it's just a much better allocation of resources to have a variety of units. This is the one brilliant thing I do like about this game. It's like, yes, you can just go for the obvious steamroll tactics of tanks, attack helicopters, as I'm doing here against AI. But the smart thing to do is to actually go with a varied army, have air defenses, have artillery, have jets when they add those. They're also going to have ships. The one downside from the developers is that they've stated, so far at least, that they're only going to do real-time battles at specific locations. Some specific battles they're going to have. Now, I think that's fine because vast majority of battles in most strategy games are just forgettable, but I do think we need more. And the way these battles are designed right now in the game without the save function, just their design, the balancing of them, etc., does leave quite a bit to be desired. So I think that's absolutely something they can improve. Remember, it's a demo by a small developer, so maybe proof of concept is best way to treat it. What is there right now has an enormous level of potential, but you can also see the issues that they could have, but you also see the potential the game could have. And it is an enormous amount of potential from my perspective. So right now in the game, in terms of grand strategy, we do have a limited campaign as Poland in the demo from December until July 2022. So what is going to happen here is Ukraine is going to fall, then Russia will try and take over the Baltics. Whether or not they succeed depends on your actions. And then they'll issue an ultimatum to Poland, which you'll refuse, so you'll end up in a war with Russia until July. You survive until July, then thing ends one way or another. Or you win at that point, though. The way the game portrays it is that NATO would finally intervene at that stage. You also have American troops, so you have British, you have American troops, you can get all kinds of different troops, so German, French, etc. It all depends on your relationship with them through hybrid warfare, so the support that they're willing to give you. And you have a number of actions available right here. This is not going to be the totality of how you interact in terms of diplomacy. They've stated that. There is going to be far more with diplomacy, and there's going to be a lot more things to also worry about in terms of military production, research, unit production, etc., etc. So it's a work in progress. As I said, it's more like a proof of concept than an actual finished game. It is a really nice demo, though. I actually really like it, even though you only really have these 4 battle points where you can have real-time battles, and they're not especially well designed right now, I would say. But you can have those real-time battles, and yes, it is dependent on the context of troops that you have there. So if you want to have a real-time battle, just mash together a bunch of tank brigades at these locations, or just fall back to try and defend Warsaw from the overwhelming might of the bear of Russia. You do have various things to worry about. So for instance, artillery can support units within a radius. Tank brigades, yeah, they're great, sound great, until you realize they also need air defenses, they need recon, they need artillery, or else they're gonna lose. They'll lose in auto-resolve, they'll lose in real-time battles. So this is brilliant because it actually pushes you to build a real army, not the idea of just like, oh, I'm gonna get 1,000 Abrams. You can get 1,000 Abrams, but then 1,000 Abrams can be destroyed by a single helicopter company, let alone a helicopter brigade. And a helicopter brigade is going to have more than just helicopters. It's going to have an armor component, it's going to have transport helicopters, it's going to have attack helicopters. There's all kinds of factors. There's going to be ships, there's going to be planes. Those are not there, but they've clearly modeled the planes already. So this looks like kind of like Warno should have been. I also do greatly appreciate the way these battles play out, because it's like mostly auto-resolve, but the auto-resolve doesn't suck in this game. You win by giving your units artillery support and having better units. Shockingly enough, actually having better units guarantees a win in auto-resolve. Imagine that situation. But also, ensuring that your units don't have a gap in the roster. Because, for instance, let's take this this group of helicopters. If you go against these guys and you have no anti-air support, they're going to destroy you. If you do have anti-air support, you'll be able to hold down against them. But then you also have to factor in the enemy supply lines and their own artillery. Do you have artillery to counter their artillery? That kind of stuff, right? It's also artillery type. So, for instance, they have tornadoes over here, a bunch of tornadoes. There's tank brigades that have better tanks than some others right here in the Russian Federation forces, because yes, there's a bunch of T-72s, but there's also gonna be a bunch of T-90s, and let's just say that dealing with a bunch of T-90s is a very different beast altogether than dealing with a bunch of T-72s, so you can kind of scout around. It is a UI issue that it's not reflecting properly, but you do genuinely have a balancing act to do. It's like, how do I gain power through hybrid actions that benefit me? Like, for instance, let's say we call in for deployment of US troops in Poland. This will give me a significant level of force available. So you'll get an armor brigade combat team, so 3 armor battalions, and with SEPV3 Abrams and 1 mechanized infantry battalion. So that's going to be a brigade, really powerful brigade. But at the same time, it does cost a good amount of American support. So you got to balance, okay, how do I maintain high level of American support so that they continuously send me troops, but also get the instant benefit of that? And you can encircle the enemy. The way you win in battle against the enemy is you cut their supply lines, you maneuver warfare. You can try and beat them directly, but that's the most inefficient way. But really, the best way is punch a hole through their lines, encircle their troops, or destroy their supply units, because those do exist in the campaign. So, for instance, let's see, where is a Russian supply unit? So you have this kind of unit that is a supply unit, a supply base. You also have them yourself, so you also have to be aware about, be concerned about that. Then there's also aspects of like naval landings, because you do have the ability through hybrid actions. For instance, over here, to get a naval pact with Sweden and Finland, or get support from the British, so that the Russians are not landing troops in, say, Gdansk or near Gdansk and bypassing your front line. You also got to worry about the front line. You got to worry about like individual locations, small towns and villages, or even big cities, and the fact that it does take an enemy a while, or your own troops a while, to actually take these over, and you can fortify them further with territorial defense, Jersey barriers, anti-tank barriers. It doesn't stop them. It slows them down. And controlling the battlefield is the essential part of warfare, and this game does do that. You win a campaign not by rushing your Abrams or Leopard 2s or Twardy tanks into the guns and the Russian tanks. You can, but the best way of winning that is controlling the battle space, slowing down the enemy at certain junctures, luring them into a trap, and then destroying their supply lines. That's, by the way, how Ukraine was able to survive in 2022. They did precisely that, because they couldn't defeat the Russians head-to-head. But they did allow the Russians to push forward far beyond their logistical capability, and they put up a resistance, and Russia was not able to match that, especially once Ukraine started bombing Russia's supply lines, especially when we consider the Belarus-Ukrainian border. You see this border right here? It seems like a massive way for someone to invade Ukraine, and Russia did. Through Belarus, through Chernobyl, actually. That's its own insanity. But what you may not know about this entire border is how impregnable it is from a natural standpoint. It's basically a swamp, much of it. Chernobyl is actually one of the better areas. Why do you think Russia invaded for there? Yes, I know. Chernobyl being an avenue of an invasion of a country is insanity. And then you look at Kyiv, right? So game doesn't necessarily represent the, but Kyiv is on both banks of the Dnipro. So you can't just conquer Kyiv by attacking from one side. You gotta attack from both sides, so any kind of advance on it is a simple nightmare. Like, you got the northern a natural frontier to the north. You've got the river for the middle of the city. Again, demo, work in progress. And it's a massive city. So you basically need to encircle it on both sides. Wonder why Russia's invasion didn't work out? Geography. Also, ambition. Ridiculous ambition on Russia's part. They thought they could do what America did against Iraq in 2003, and Ukraine was not Iraq, suffice to say. And even America's situation in 2003 was, let's just say it was a risk. It went very well. It also could have blown up in everyone's face as well back then. But my point is, the game is doing a great job with these things. They're still work in progress. Keep in mind, the game right now is not about Kyiv. So I do think that should be represented better. But Warsaw, Poland, Kaliningrad, as far as I know, I'm no expert on Polish geography. I haven't looked at it from a military standpoint. I hope I never get to a point in my life where I have to worry about, like, what are the natural barriers for the defense of Warsaw. Though I might do so for this video game. But yeah, you look at Kaliningrad, you've got 2 parts to the city right here. You've got various parts for Warsaw as well. So you have these kind of natural barriers. I mean, I know something about Warsaw, right? You know, Battle of Warsaw, Warsaw Uprising. Modern Warsaw, I'm not quite familiar with. Maybe I should learn something about that. But I think any game that puts that question to you as a player is like, okay, should I open, a page on Poland's natural barriers, military bases, military equipment, Russia's military bases and equipment, what works, what doesn't, what are the pros and cons of each side, and really dive into those details? Because that is what Total War has done, by the way, in the past. It was really interesting to dive into the nitty-gritty details of, say, Napoleon and his tactics, his strategy, to really figure out how to win a Total War campaign in the past. So if I think that game replicates that feeling, it's going to be an amazing game. We'll find out. Questine signing out.